Ooh, looks like we are live. All right. Well, while we're getting started, I'm going to put something on in the background for me to listen to. I guess when I'm doing these live now, no one can hear what I'm playing in the background because of the background cancellation. But this just came in about a year late. This is the brand new Midnight Odyssey. I guess a year old Midnight Odyssey, but yeah, the third part of the Biolume series. So while people are getting ready to roll in here, put that on. Yay! How you doing, Frosty? All right. Hey, Peter. Good to see you, man. Been a little. All right. So I got that going in the background there. Mike, Tyler. All right. So good to see everyone. This is kind of an impromptu live stream I decided to throw up, but I have not done any live streams this year, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to sort of talk about something that's been on my mind. Thanks, Peter. Yes. Happy birthday. We got Tyler, Mike, Peter, Frosty. All right. Yeah. So I did turn 40 this year, and I guess that'll tie in a little bit to the conversation. But this, I guess, started earlier in 2024 as sort of a thought experiment. And I hadn't really found a way to make it concrete until we started to bring together our end of 2024 albums. So I guess what I realized in this process is, yeah, thanks, Mike. I tend to find I enjoy end of year lists. I like, in general, I compulsively end up making sort of compilation or list of bands. I end up grouping them together and trying to find a way to sort of completely out of any arbitrary meaning, group them together. And what happened was I realized, now that I've been doing YouTube for a little bit and I keep on making these 2020 or 2024, 2023, 2022, I joined YouTube in 2021. I guess what I've found is that end of year lists tend to favor brand new projects, right? Just as I've started to more, I'm doing okay. There has been more power metal in my life this year, Frosty, but whatever. An experimentation. We'll see about the medication aches and pains. I do find that I am a bit more susceptible to, if I sit, for a long period of time and get up, I definitely feel it more than I used to. But where was I? So yeah, end of year lists, and it favors, first time, anything that catches me off guard, something I didn't see coming. A brand new band is formed, a brand new project comes together, a band that potentially I didn't have my eye on, and then put out a record and it grabs my attention. In this case, this past year, there were a couple of bands who hadn't released anything in decades and came out with a record. Anyway, that's where I tend to find, thanks. Mike's giving me a hard time here about my running for sure. Everyone, well, apparently the body is slowly preparing for death, according to the chat. So I'm what do they call it? Failure to thrive. We'll just keep an eye on failure to thrive. But yeah, so what really ends up appearing more and more on my end of year list are bands that are relatively new, and I guess what I find is it is harder and harder for a band to sort of stay consistent, right? And if we go back to the beginning of 2024 and they did a metal tag, my answer for anytime someone says, like, what's a band that doesn't fail or can do no wrong or can't miss or everything they release is classic. My answer to that, like, reflexively, is Evoken. That band for me always puts out just quality stuff, right? And I don't. What I end up thinking is, if Evoken comes out with a new record in 2025, let's say, would it make your end of year list? And I guess as a YouTuber and as a collector, I kind of feel divided there, right? I guess what I mean by that is I would immediately go out and grab the record, no questions asked. I wouldn't have to preview a track. At some level, I'm just committed to the band and everything they put out. So I don't know if they'd make an end of year list for me, but they absolutely are an important band for me personally. And I guess that's kind of what I wanted to talk about is one, like the hype and excitement that we feel, paying attention to new releases. As I'm, now 40 years old, I'm still spend a good amount of time listening to younger bands, newer artists, where I think maybe at some point in time in the future that will wane and I'll drop off, but I still pay attention to a lot of new releases. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit is like things that probably won't make my end of year list, but I do think are important records. And just how I've gotten, like, through the years as I get a little bit older, how I've started to sort of chronicle or separate, different bands from different part of my sort of life. So the record, I've got a bunch of stuff thrown across the room here. So hold on one second. As everyone in the chat apparently is over 40 and ruminating about the future of their own demise. And we got Celti's turning 54, Mike's turning 50. Yeah. Anyway, it's good to see you, old head over there. Good to see you, man. I don't know if I've seen you in the chat before, but good to have you. Anyway, so let me get this to the record that I've picked out and sort of got this thing rolling for me. Okay, so this band, Critical Defiance, Search Won't Fall. This is the one that sort of began this thought process for me, and we'll come back to this. But what I was thinking, this is their third record, and we got Devin's in the chat. Chris, good to see you. Anyway, this band, when it released Misconception in 2019, really grabbed my attention, and they have been a thrash band that I thought could do no wrong for the longest amount of time. And then this album came out, and there's like a 10-minute stretch. I did a review of over on a Heavy Metallurgy. John, good to see you. 4 issues at 30 than 40. Yeah, man, my 20s were rough. I'll just say that. In a lot of good ways, but a lot of bad ways. But 30s were good. Hopefully the 40s are equally as kind to me. But this this record had about a 10-minute stretch that really kind of let me down. And I thought that the third record is kind of potentially the line of division, right? And I just want to keep that in mind, because I'm going to take you back in a little bit of my sort of metal history for this. And we'll venture back to Critical Defiance and sort of the third record, Threshold, that I wanted to talk about. But Okay, so now let's talk about me being old and stuff. Um, in preparing for this, I kind of splintered. While 2024 isn't important by any stretch in terms of like a year or, um, we tend to sort of group decades in by like 2010 to 2020, 2020 to 2020 or 2030. But for the first 20 years of my life, so 1984 to 2004, that's kind of where I wanted to group this first initial part of my collection, whatever conversation. So these are bands I don't want to talk about at length, or records that I don't want to talk about at length, but at least to demonstrate a point for this. Okay, so for the first 20 years, I think of that time period in terms of my collecting and metal listening habits as being like records and bands that were important to me, but like ended up establishing some baseline, right? Like, here are the bands that you kind of initially gravitate to, and the rest of your listening habits and collecting will sort of be driven by your affection for these bands. So we talked about Beyond the Wandering Moon, Manila Road, Open the Gates, Suffocation, Pierce from Within, Candlemass, Nightfall, Neurosis, Through Silver and Blood, Carcass, Symphonies of Sickness. So what I mean to say is, like, these are bands that peaked before my time period, right? They had like a major influence, but I don't really feel like generationally connected to them. Their time period really precedes mine in terms of being a metal listener and a metal collector to a large degree. While I kind of got into the genre at the end of the 90s, pretty much everything that I'm showing off here, with maybe the exception of Eternus, are like mid 90s and earlier. So that's kind of the first 20 years of my collecting. Yeah. Arturantis. Yeah, I'm familiar with that band, Devin. They've been around for a little bit, right? Anyway, I've heard a few of their records and kind of dig them. Kind of interesting stuff. Turning 13 was a real bummer. Uh, Somehow I think you're doing all right, Chris. All right. All brilliant albums. Yeah. I thank you, Mike. I do think that Open the Gates is the greatest Manila Road record, but for me, it's like that series of whatever Crystal Logic through Mystification that I think is their big run that is worth their time. So anyway, those are essentially my first 20 years as a record collector. And then what happens after that is, like, in my 20s to my 30s, these are bands that I would consider like my generational contribution to the genre, and I would be a completist in terms of collecting. Like, they mean something to me personally. They're sort of on the come up and rising in popularity and awareness from the time that I'm 20 years old until I'm 30, right? So we're talking about bands like Stargazer. This is Merging to the Boundless, Ruins of Everest, Alice Seaman of the Sheltered Elite. We'll get back to this record here in a second. Ulcerate, Everything is Fire. Bloat Av Snore, the work which transforms God. And this is the debut Oranssi Pazuzu record, but I do not want to fail in the pronunciation of this, so you can all look it up. But anyway, these are bands that like emerge in the aughts, and to me are like personally meaningful. Um, but if I go back, I was doing this YouTube thing in 2020 when Little Grimoires came out. I really had no desire to like list this out on my end of year sort of album sort of deal. It's like at this point in time, the band had been around for over 15 years, I want to say, and they're pretty well known. At this point in time, even though it might be our little small universe over here on like underground metal listening, I feel the Ruins of Everest is a pretty well-known band. And at this point, like, I don't feel like they need, or they don't have an appeal to me in terms of listing them in the end of year list. Of course, I'm going to grab it. I'm absolutely going to listen to it. It's a band that I personally identify with, but like, is this going to be on my end of year list? Absolutely not. I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at, is at some level, I think the end of year list thing becomes just kind of like what's fun and new. So this is kind of where we get a little bit more interesting. So let's talk about bands that have faded, right? Like debut records that felt really meaningful and attractive. There was tons of hype and attention given to them. But now I fast forward a few years, if not over a decade from the first release, and I really have very little interest in picking up their newer records. Like the most obvious one for me comes from last year. This is The Chills from Horrendous. This is the one Horrendous album I own. And I know it's like a big deal now. And if you love this band and everything they've put out, that's awesome. All good. But from when this was first released to where I feel now this band is, I'm just completely divorced from it. And no longer do I feel like this connects at all. It's completely just drifted off my radar. Maybe got more people. Devin, still haven't heard all the band. Yeah, like I definitely recommend if you have not heard. Some of it is like transitional records. You don't need to hear everything, but hopefully at least, Devin, you've picked up that particular record, because The Work Which Transforms God is probably their most seminal release. More Stargazer in your collection, Frosty. Go grab, like there's, like for me, can't miss band for sure, but they've been around also for a long time. Like here, The Scream That Tore the Sky, like this one is 2005, I want to say. 2005, 2006. They've been around for a long time. Yeah. I know, but see, that's but I got both Peter and Tyler in the chat here. And for diehard 90s black metal people, I can completely understand that. The Ruins of Everest to me is a totally different animal, though. So, what up, Wade? Good to see you, man. So, yeah. So, bands that were hyped that I think James is here talking about. I have no idea what James is on there. No rainbows or unicorns, James. So yeah, this is the one Horrendous record. I just completely feel like this band has fallen off the map for me. And if you love them, you're listening to this, then like all good, but no longer a band I'm really interested in. Another one that's 2015. Man, Earth Film Champion, The Armor of Ire. When this came out, it was a big deal. I still think people who love sort of this traditional heavy metal thing, this is sort of seen as like an important record. But after this, I mean, I kind of almost feel this is I don't want to say like overrated record, but after I listen to this, I don't feel I need any more Eternal Champion. Maybe people in the chat may disagree with me, but this is the one I own, and I kind of feel like after this, I'm good. So And my God, here's a more recent history. Talk about a band I do not really care about anymore. Man, this got so much attention when it first came out. This Moonlight Sorcery. Once again, if you love this band and this is a project, I know they've got a couple of releases out now. But I heard the follow-up that didn't, I think Avant Garde picked them up, and it could have been too long after this EP. But Moonlight Sorcery, when this came out, it was like a big, I mean, there was a lot of momentum behind this band. And at this point, I don't listen to them at all anymore. Maybe everyone's going to light me on fire for that, but I don't know. I don't know. Do you all still pay attention to Moonlight Sorcery? Do you enjoy them? I don't know. For me, not anymore. Right. So I haven't. These are bands that, like, I think in the year that they had been released would have been given a lot of attention and consideration. Yeah, Moonlight Sorcery has gone a little bit too black metal meets power metal for my taste. John, yep, Maze agrees. It's basically Moonlight Sorcery and power metal, right, with black metal vocals. The whole, like, it was really, when I first heard them, I thought it was awesome, but it's completely lost whatever interest for me. Good to see you, Marty. Happily joining in. I'm talking about releases that have sort of been overhyped or that have lost. I don't want to say that. That sounds like me being an asshole. So they're just records that I feel had a lot of attention when they first came out, but are a good example of how sort of, like, whether it's YouTube, it's the world that I navigate, so that I see all the time, but social media, things kind of catch fire and they burn bright, but they burn out pretty quickly. And I think it's harder now for a band to have a solid string of albums. It's much more difficult to do that than to have one great record that gets all attention, all the hype, and then ends up sort of fizzing out over time. Man, that's a great call. So Blood Incantation, Star Spawn, when that was released in 2016, it was a big record, right? I have not, just in passing, have seen tons of people talk about it. It's got a lot of attention, right? And at some level, like, great. If your band is all, or you're all into the newest Blood Incantation record, and that's going to make your top, end of year list, that's totally fine. I'm not necessarily hating against, like, bands being successful. It's just, for me, like I don't have a personal connection with those records at all, or those bands anymore. So now that is to say, yeah, I want to listen to Morbid Angel. We don't need to get off the rails here about Blood Incantation, but anyway. Yeah, but it's another example. Like, Star Spawn is a record that had a lot of impact, and I just feel that band has drifted somewhere else outside of my listening habits, and I don't pay attention to the same way I used to. So let me go. Now I'm going to flip the record that you guys can't hear. For anyone who missed it, I'm listening to the, I guess, year-old Midnight Odyssey. This is part of the third part of the Biolume series, but that's what I've got going in the background. You can't hear it, but just so everyone knows. Okay, so where am I heading with all this? Bands that I think have a strong sort of, I connected with them, but they've had sort of consistency over the years, right? I guess is where I'm heading. And these are, relatively newer bands. So let's just kind of get into that. So, like I mentioned, for me, Evoken was an example of a band that I was paying attention to, and I think is a can't miss band. But oh man, Tony, I feel like I'm a young one in the chat, but 40 for me, like people are all telling me I'm getting to get ready for death. The chat has been a little bit dire in terms of my turning 40 this year, but yeah, Wade, it's true. And like I was saying, so bands that are sort of can't miss, right? So I Evoken sort of my reflexive answer to that. What up, Peter? Moonstar is a good call too. Moonstar is another band that, but they have not released a record in a long ass time. 2016 was their last. I mean, we're almost getting up to a decade with that band. So, but let me get back to my train of thought here. So, a band like Evoken for me, Lord Vicar is probably my favorite traditional doom band. They've been around since mid 2000s, essentially since Reverend Bizarre dissolved. So this is a can't miss doom band, but right mid 2000s. Blackened death metal, Embrace of Thorns, band from Greece. They've been around the debuts in 2009. So coming up on 15 years or so. Love this band. Cannot do anything wrong. The most consistent sort of blackened, I don't want to call them quite war metal, but like blackened death metal band out there for me. And a couple other bands that have been around for a while and released albums this year, but you won't see them on my end of year list. Sunday, good to see you, man. People are slowly pouring in here. Like, there was a new release by this band, Inter Arma, that came out. This is Sky Burial from 2013, right? This band's been around for, I think their debut was in 2010. And they've kind of eclipsed that, period for me where there have been enough solid records. Like their previous full length was Sulphur English, I want to say in 2019, 2020. And I really liked that band, that record, I should say. So, well, Inter Arma's, I guess relatively young. For me as a listener, at this point, they're kind of an established band. I don't feel obligated to put them on my end of year list. Oh man, Tim, I think you might win. I think you've eclipsed Marty. So, cheers to you. I will. Thanks for joining. But like another band, just like Inter Arma, this is Arsteater License, a band that's been around for about the same time. I think their debut full lengths in 2010. And everyone who potentially watched my review for Heavy Metallurgy knows how much I love this band. But just like Inter Arma, I feel like they are going to be an automatic purchase, no questions asked, a favorite band of mine. And I just don't feel like an end of year list. There's a band that has kind of occupied this pagan black metal thing for me in 2024 that will be on my end of year list. Just for anyone's wondering, was hoping they were going to get an end of year list. It's not going to happen. I've got 2 other different occasions where I'll be doing end of year list stuff with other streams. So this is just kind of talking about the list making practice. And Tim's got it. Thank you, Tyler. Tim's got the crown for sure. Marty's going to relinquish the old fart crown. Nice. I listen to what I like to hear, plain and simple. I got you, cowboy. Hey, man, it's been a while. Scott, turning 50 next year. Good to see you, man. But I absolutely love Our State of License, but I feel like there are other bands that are going to walk into this space, and sort of be the record that I'll pull on an end of year list because I don't see it coming. Whereas when they release a new record, like, it's going to be a major event for me. So, just as kind of an examples of things you won't see on an end of year list, but I do think are much harder to achieve, which is longevity, which are consistent records that sort of work for you or your fan base, or for me as a listener personally. 100%, that band is worth my time. So, in closing, I kind of want to talk about bands on the threshold. Okay. So, I really enjoyed this second release from Ghastly, Death Velour, like really cool, sort of dreamy Finnish death metal. Album artwork is gorgeous, stunning artwork, by the way. But yeah, I really liked this record. And then fast forward a couple of years, I think this is in 2019, 2018, maybe 2018. Man, this Mercurial Reflection, okay, Mercurial Passages, I'm sorry, Mercurial Passages. I don't want to say this was a letdown, but I definitely felt a little bit less inspired by this release. And I guess that's what kind of has me wondering, like, as a band on the threshold for me personally, like, when their fourth release comes out, it'll either sort of put a nail in the coffin, and I will 100% be sold, and like, you have my whatever allegiance for albums to come. But this one kind of has me on the fence, right? Whereas Death Velour, like, I was all in. Same thing I could say about this following band. We covered this with On Album Club, Fourth Dimensional Flesh by Afterbirth. Man, in but not of, this is a trip. Like, I still don't know what to do with this record. I don't know if anyone has heard this, but it is so strange, and it feels like at times a bridge too far for me. Like, I really enjoy what they're doing as a brutal death metal band, but it's just so out there. I kind of felt like it was a step in a direct. I didn't need them to go any further than this. But man, this is it was so far out there. I don't know if anyone has heard this. I want to say Melanie's talked about it. I want to say Jim, who joins us for Album Club, has picked this up. But I was really excited for this record, and we got the promo, and it's still kind of a weird trip for me. So I don't know what to make of this record. I kind of feel like they may be heading in a direction that's further than I want them to. Man, let me see. I don't know these last two. Kellen is getting to be the Jack list length. Okay. He induced vomiting, vertigo, suicide. Please, or proceed. Oh man. So Wade, I like Mercurial. Don't get me wrong, but Velour for me was a much better record. So just differences, I guess. So in that sense, I feel the same way about this Critical Defiance record. they kind of feel like they're now on a threshold where I don't know where the future of this band goes. And within in a Misconception in 2019, I felt like they could absolutely do no wrong. No Life Forms, which came out in 2022, was like a great kind of crossover thrash record. This one, man, there's just a little bit of a moment that just ruins this record for me. And I kind of feel like, okay, what I once thought was a sure thing, maybe not so much. And there are a couple of bands that, right, just for people kind of keeping count, what do these 3 records have in common? Afterbirth's kind of tricky, but because they have like this weird sort of demo period from the early 90s. But in terms of actual full lengths, this is their 3rd full length. But all of these are the 3rd release by the band, 3rd full length. And I feel like that is kind of your threshold for, at least for me, as to when I completely get bought in on a band. You need to have at least 3 solid records in your discography to sort of get me going and interested in a way that I feel committed to what the band is doing for the years to come. I don't know what happened. John says a yacht rock deep dive thanks to Lazarus on Friday. I missed Friday, so I don't know if it was all yacht rock cover songs. I think that was the theme for Friday, but anyway. So I guess that's what I kind of want to close this live stream is, you know, next Saturday, I'll do another one of these talking about bands that have sort of eclipsed a threshold where I feel they're putting out can't miss records. They've been doing it consistently enough through the years. There are 4 bands that put out their 3rd record here in 2024. And for me, going forward, they will be can't miss selections. So the other bands I feel are almost there, right? Like, I've been talking about Megaton Sword for a while now, but they just have 2 records. So I'm kind of thinking, like, what is this 3rd record going to lead? And where this record ends kind of has me a little bit nervous. I don't know what their 3rd record will hold. I absolutely loved their debut release. The EP was great, but we're going to get a 3rd record from this band in the coming years. Fingers crossed. And I will be, you know, a little bit nervous about approaching it with the same kind of enthusiasm that I had towards Blood Hails Steel, Steel Hails Fire. Might and Power is a good record. Maybe they're sort of on equal level in terms of quality, but the next record, I'm a little bit nervous. Another Finnish death metal band, Asphodelis. This kind of dreamy death doom, December Souls kind of death metal. Only 2 full lengths in an EP. You know, the question for me is, like, will they continue to put out this kind of quality? You know, I hope, yeah, Mike, I hope it tops Might and Power as well. So the question, do you think, is, did you like Blood Hails Steel more than Might and Power? I guess that would be my question to you, because I kind of liked the debut more. Yeah, I think, Wade, you're talking about the Asphodelis record. Yeah, this one is, hey, Tyler's out. Awesome. Good to see you, man. I'm wrapping up here too. So I'll see you later. I'm sure I'll do catch up later on another like end of year stream with you. Oh man. Okay, Mike, you're saying that Might and Power might be your favorite. Okay. Marty says it's going to be interrelating to hear what Megaton Sword goes next. I could go either way. All right, and I guess another band on the brink for me is this Profane Order, right? Kind of Bolt Thrower goes war metal. Just 2 releases in. I liked this less than the debut, though. Still a good band for me, but when I think about like these artists, these bands, they're relatively young in their career, just a couple of full lengths in. At this point, like they'll make an end of year list for me just because I'm sort of tentatively waiting on how the next record comes out and whether it succeeds. But I think it's I'm a little bit sort of wary about being completely all in on them. Interesting. Goddamn autocorrect. Okay. James, you like Might and Power more? Didn't care for the debut. We disagree there. Struggle with Profane Order, Frosty. I mean, I get it. It might not be your cup of tea, but lots of non-metal moments for sure. So I guess just in wrapping up, next Saturday I'm gonna do another live stream, and it'll be a bit more organized and orchestrated, but I'm just gonna be talking about 10 bands that, just so you know what the criteria is from 2014 to 2024, over that decade. So essentially from the time that I was 30 until now 40, 10 bands that I think have put out quality records, and there'll be some like meaningful criteria that kind of made this list for me. But I just been thinking about bands that are consistent and still relatively young, that over the past decade, I've kind of been able to sort of depend on, from their debut full length to now 3 records in, have proven that they're going to be a consistent band to sort of lean on. And while they might not make my end of year list anymore, they will consistently make up part of my collection. And I guess I've become a little bit wary of getting too excited about a band's debut. I guess I'm a little bit more cautious now about going to pick up that second release or third release without hesitation, right? And before I start diving into a band's entire discography, I kind of slow down a little bit. Witch Hazel, you guys covered, is my favorite. Yeah, I mean, and just they will be there next week. A little spoiler there, Devin, but for sure, Witch Hazel is a band that's been incredibly consistent, and I'll be talking about them next Saturday for sure. Gonna spin some Megaton Sword. All right. Yeah. There is, I don't know, Frosty, if you're familiar with Vulture's Vengeance, but they've got a new record. It'll be their second full length coming out here, I want to say in February. You might want to check them out. I think Alan's mentioned them in the past, but I really dig them. Once again, they're called Vulture's Vengeance on Gates of Hell Records. Man, that is so true, Mike. If they had a better lead guitarist, that would make the band, I think, a little more interesting. They live and die. Yeah, Marty agrees. They live and die by the vocalist for sure. So this is my little impromptu stream. Look at that neat and tidy live stream in 45 minutes. Anyway, I will be end of year list. If anyone is interested, I'll be joining the Heavy Metallurgy crew for that next Friday. We'll try and be quick and concise because it'll be a full house. And maybe we'll get a chance to talk about things afterwards. And then next Saturday, I'll do another one of these live streams and be talking about sort of over the past decade, probably in my opinion, the most consistent bands who consistently are putting out great records, and probably in the years to come will be a part of my collection. So until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a good night. Thank you everyone for jumping in the chat, sort of this impromptu thing on a Sunday, but I'll see you guys all later. Bye.